On being unapologetic, the father just said about the Te Tiriti O Waitangi, but on his kōrero, and we want to welcome everyone here. Like what the sister Carla said, it's another perspective, and this kōrero is just an open kōrero. If you've got questions, kei te pai. But once I hand it over to the brother, he's just going to go and let it fly. Te pau o manga tāwhiri, I've got Tonga Tapu, representing Tonga Tapu and Hāmoa, and also the kāhui whānau as well. Mai te puaha o Waikato, nō reira, he piko he taniwha, e te rangatira, nau mai, hara mai, tēnei te mihi atini ki a tātou katoa. Just going to hand it straight over whānau, kia ora.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Kalolo Haufano tōku ingoa, and it's an honour and a privilege to be with you all here today. And big mihi to Auckland Council, thank you so much for inviting me and believing in me and sharing my whakaaro when it comes to Te Tiriti O Waitangi. Ko tēnei taku mihi ki ngā tangata whenua o te rohe nei, ka mihi o ki au ki ngā tōhu mō ngā tikanga o te rohe nei. I firstly want to acknowledge the peoples of this area. I also want to acknowledge the landmarks, the customs, the protocols of this area as well. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. I want to start off by sharing with you a story of a young South Auckland teenager, only 15 years old. He was a year 11 high school student looking at different classes he could take during year 12. For those that don't know, between years 12 to year 13 in Aotearoa, most high schools give you the option to choose your subjects. There are many options for this boy to choose from, but one class in his eyes stood out the most, and that was Aotearoa history. This class was special to him. It was like opening a door to a whole new world of thought. This young teen learned about the people who arrived to this whenua nearly 800 years ago, about the European settlers, missionaries, whalers and sealers who came across the sea, and the big fights and rarurarus over the whenua. He heard stories about promises made and promises broken, and these events formed the country where he was born and raised. But this young man didn't just learn from books. He went to see some of this history in real life. Kanohi ki te kanohi. He visited Waitangi, where Te Tiriti was signed. Kororareka Russell, where Honeheke cut down the British flag not just once but 4 times. In Rangiriri, where countless Māori were martyred for their ancestral lands in the Waikato. He also learnt about the Great South Road. I'm pretty sure most of us know the road, the Great South Road here. A road very close to his home. He found out that Māori once called it arahikoi, a walking pathway for pre-colonial Māori, but was later turned into a road for war. This road, including Redoubt Road, the British had built the Redoubt Road, was used to move British soldiers and weapons down to parts of Tainui Iwi land during the Waikato Wars. This young boy was so passionate in Aotearoa history that he wanted to study at university, but he wasn't sure how. So off he went to the careers office at his high school, kia ora, and they helped him apply for scholarships. He was lucky to get one that would pay for his university studies, opening more opportunities for him to delve deeper into Aotearoa history, being taught by some of the greatest New Zealand historians of all time. James Belich, Dr. Aroha Harris, to name a few. Now, I've got something to share with you all at Te Whānau. That boy in the story is me. Bit dramatic, say. It's me. A high school kid who went to the mighty James Cook High School, real hard. But there's more to me than just sharing a story of my life. I'm sharing this with you as someone who stands proud as tangata moana, a Kiwi raised in Manirewa, South Auckland with roots stretching back to Samoa and Tonga. The journey of learning New Zealand history wasn't just about filling my head with dates and events. It was knowing more about where I was born and seeing the past through the eyes of those courageous people who built wakas, navigated vast oceans, and made this place their home. The first ever kaitiakis of this land. These same people lived amongst my ancestors many years ago. In my kōrero today, I want to share with you my perspectives of Te Tiriti O Waitangi and where it is today from the perspective of someone who studied for 3 years on New Zealand history. Learning this history all those years ago, I started my degree in 2007 at the University of Auckland to 2010, has shaped and provided clarity to my perspectives of the context of Te Tiriti today. I'll be honest, there's been much public coverage recently about Te Tiriti principles being at risk of reversing years and years of hard work and progress. But as a historian, and I'm a true believer that all of us can be historians in our own right, for us to know about today, we need to go back to the past. So that's where I'll take you in my kōrero today. History in pre-colonial times. Māori around 800 years ago were the original settlers of this country we call home, arriving in large wakas from across the Pacific Ocean, guided by the stars above and from the spiritual homeland of Hawaii. Māori also trace back heritage to Eastern Polynesia and countries like Tahiti and Cook Islands. Māori built their lives and communities in harmony with the land and the sea around them. They were great farmers, growing foods like kumara, taro and yams in gardens they tended to with care. Yes, e te whānau, archaeologists out in the Coromandel have found and carbon dated that the early Māori that had moved here were eating taro, kia ora, okay? The sea and rivers were their supermarkets, where they fished for kaimoana. They also hunted birds and gathered plants from the forests. Their knowledge of the environment allowed them to thrive, making use of everything nature offered, wasting nothing. In their communities, everyone had a role, and together they built strong, fortified villages called pā. These weren't just homes, they were cleverly designed to protect their whānau to stand strong against any threats. Māori back in those days were artists, carvers and weavers, creating beautiful works that told stories and held the wisdom of their people. Their tattoos, tāmoko, were more than just body art. They were a way of showing who they were, their whakapapa, their achievements, and their status in the community. Māori believed deeply in the spiritual connection to their ancestors and the land. They saw the world around them filled with mana and tapu. Knowing this mātauranga taught me the value of, number one, living in harmony with our environment, and number two, honouring our ancestors. As a young Pasifika teen learning this for the first time, I remember thinking to myself, this was probably similar to the way that my Pasifika ancestors lived for thousands of years. The arrival of European settlement. Fast forward to the late 1700s, more than 500 years after Māori first arrived into these shores. Europeans set foot in Aotearoa. Many of them were attracted to what? Natural resources of this beautiful whenua. Seals, whales, timber, harakeke, flax. Why these materials, you may say? These materials were highly valued back in England for different reasons. For fashion, for constructing buildings, and lighting. Fun fact, electricity wasn't in Aotearoa until nearly 50 years after the treaty was signed in 1840. So, in order for this world to govern without electricity, you needed oil to light your lamps. And a lot of that comes from seal and whale blubber. The 1700s was a time when the world was expanding and Europeans were exploring far off lands, looking to build wealth and their empires. Aotearoa offered a new opportunity for tauiwi, hungry for Aotearoa resource, ripe for the taking. One of the last pieces of quote unquote, untouched land to ever be discovered in this world. The first European to land in New Zealand was James Cook, which is ironic because I went to James Cook High School, kia ora. I remember at James Cook High School wanting to understand, like, who's this tāne that we honoured with a statue next to our school hall? Captain James Cook and his ship were the first Europeans to ever step foot on the soil in October 1769. Abel Tasman just went past, okay? He tried to go onto the land, but Māori had fought them, and then they decided to gap it. So that was 120 years before Captain James Cook arrived. On the 6th of October 1769, one of Cook's shipping crew saw this land from afar and said, "Hey, I see land." And then by October 8th, they had docked and set foot for the first time out in Poverty Bay in the Hawke's Bay, so out on the east coast. Following this discovery at Te Whānau, hundreds of settlers started arriving in New Zealand after word quickly spread in Europe of a land that was discovered. So, how did Māori come into play here when they first arrived? Māori initially greeted foreign visitors, also known as tauiwi, with openness, intrigued by them and their advanced technology. They entered into trade exchange with Māori, exchanging natural resources for metal tools and muskets. So muskets being those long traditional guns, and that played a big role in New Zealand history. These new items were unlike anything Māori had seen before, offering advantages in their daily lives and warfare. This time of history at Te Whānau was a time of great change. Think about it. The meeting of two very, very different worlds came together and brought about a transformation in the lives of Māori, the effects of which many generations would feel even to this day. So I want us to jump forward 66 years after 1769 to 1835. And New Zealand was a home to a few hundred settlers back in those days. But one big word stood as an important part of that part of history, and that is lawlessness. In simple terms, this means that there wasn't any written laws in Aotearoa to guide everybody. But let's think about that a bit more. The many hapu and iwi already lived by their own laws, called tikanga Māori, which guided their way of life. So when we talk about lawlessness back in the days, we're really talking about the lack of laws to govern this country for both Māori and European settlers together in society. Imagine New Zealand as a whenua with no rules, where everyone is trying to trade and get land to live on, some playing fair, some getting ripped off. It was all getting a bit messy. It was like trying to play a game of rugby without any referees, confusing and a bit wild. Disease was also spreading all over the whenua among Māori. Because they had no immunity at that time to new diseases like flu, measles, tuberculosis and smallpox, it was killing many of them. Some historians and scientists have estimated that when James Cook had arrived to New Zealand, there were about 100 to 200,000 Māori before he arrived. This went to as low as 42,000 by the late 1800s. So, in 1835 is a very important year. Northern Māori rangatira chiefs, alongside British interests, came together like a team deciding on their game plan on how to solve this lawlessness. And then they created He Whakaputanga o Te Rangatira o Nutireni, the Declaration of Independence. This was Māori's way of saying, we're in charge of our whenua, like captains of our ship, steering it where we want to go, making sure everybody played by the rules and respected the land and each other. 34 Northern Māori chiefs initially signed in 1835, and then 4 years later, another 18 chiefs, Northern Māori chiefs, signed. Although the Declaration of Independence is not considered our founding document, it became a foundation of rights for tangata whenua and was another step towards a formal constitutional relationship with Britain. Now this is the part where I bring up Te Tiriti. As you can see here, ngā mihi to everyone that had provided all of this. This is just an example of Te Tiriti. Why we are all here today and where we all New Zealanders get a public holiday. But also, I believe it is a time for our country to reflect on the massive milestone in our country's history. In 1840, a formal agreement at Waitangi occurred, bringing together Māori chiefs and the Crown. This was to sign the Treaty of Waitangi, New Zealand's most important document. But here's where it gets a bit tricky at Te Whānau. The treaty was written in two languages, Māori and English, Te Reo Māori and English. And the words didn't mean the same thing in both versions. Imagine this. Imagine playing a game where each team has a different set of rules. It's going to lead to confusion and arguments, right? Would you guys agree? That's what happened with the Treaty of Waitangi. Te Tiriti had 4 things that I want to share with you in its articles that are important for us to consider. Number 1, who's the boss? The treaty had 2 versions saying different things about who gets to make the big decisions in this country. The English version said the British would be in charge of New Zealand. The Māori version said they would let the British govern, but Māori chiefs would still be leaders over their lands and people, also known kawanatanga. It's like 2 captains thinking they're in charge of the same ship. Number 2, selling land. Both versions talked about selling Māori land, but in a tricky way. The English version said only the British could buy land from Māori. The Māori version says Māori could still sell land, but the British got to ask first. Imagine wanting to sell your bike, but you can only offer it to one friend first. Number 3, keeping control. The treaty was supposed to protect Māori control over their lands and taonga, but things didn't always go to plan, and Māori found it hard to keep control when Te Tiriti was implemented. It's like being promised you can keep living on your land that you and your ancestors have lived on for centuries, only to find out it's going to be turned into a parking lot. Number 4, equal rights. The treaty said Māori would be treated just like any British person with the same rights. But sometimes, Māori were treated unfairly, especially over land. It's like everyone being told that they can play the game, but some aren't given a fair chance to win. To me and Te Whānau, words have deep and important meaning. We always say this today, especially from our parents. And I want to acknowledge my mum and dad who are here. I love you, mum and dad. But my parents will always say to me when I was young, if you say something, make sure you keep to your word. I also want to give a shout out to my teacher that inspired me to love history, Mr. Driver, a British man from London who had a love for Aotearoa. One of the main reasons why I'm standing here today speaking about this topic. He taught me in high school how what's written down and what actually happens can be 2 very different things. And he taught me the concept of nominal versus substantial. This lesson that I learned from Mr. Driver helped me understand that this is one of the main reasons why the treaty led to so many conflicts later on, like the New Zealand Wars and the rise of the kingitanga movement. The words on paper didn't match up with how things were done, leading to a lot of misunderstandings and fights about land, power, and your own individual rights. A lot of hard conversations and work to fix historical misunderstandings at Te Whānau continues to be seen today. For me, my personal opinion, it's about making sure those promises made long ago are really kept, making things fair for everyone. Before I end my speech, I want to share with you 3 things that I have learned from my experiences of learning history at high school, university, and beyond all these years. Number 1, Te Tiriti O Waitangi is a foundational document to this country, as it is. The partnership between Māori and the Crown is central to understanding our nation's fabric. It baffles me to this day that I was only taught this Aotearoa history as an optional course at 6th form. It's essential that this isn't sidelined in our education system, but introduced early on to our tamariki and rangatahi, fostering a deep national identity among future generations. I'm a believer, if you know your history, you become patriotic for the country that you come from. Number 2, early and genuine consultation with Māori is crucial. The legislative process, as part of this country that we refer to social democratic processes, must include Māori perspectives from the outset, right from the get-go. Not when legislation is drafted, debated in Parliament and presented at a select committee, way back. Have a kōrero with Māori first. They are one of 2 parties in this tiriti. Anything related to Māori needs to be discussed with Māori. This was not done in this current case. And number 3, acknowledging and respecting the journey of indigenous rights is vital. I stem this point from my Samoan and Tongan heritage. marked by history and the revitalization of cultural rights, shows to me the importance of supporting tangata whenua, who is part of Polynesia, to be honest. We're all whānau on this ongoing journey. Recognizing the complexities of these issues, we must strive to protect and celebrate the progress made. I invite you all to not be ashamed to learn our history. Don't be whakamā. We live in a technological age where information is literally at our fingertips. Knowledge is power, but even more, knowledge applied is power. Take action. Have mana motuhake to learn our history and share it with your whānau, your friends, and communities. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Tēnā koe te rangatira. Nui tō tāpēnei haringa, tēnei te mihi atu ane kia koe no te mea I tukuna tō taha o tō mātaurana. E pāna ki te tiriti o Waitangi, anō rai e pāna ki tō mana motuhake. I te taha hā moa, anō rai I te taha